I didn't really think about anything. And I think I had the luxury of not thinking about anything, which is kind of the purest form of climbing, not just competition climbing, but climbing in general.
Welcome to the Testpiece podcast. This podcast is about all things high-level climbing. How to go from good to great. I'm your host, Joshua Horsley. I've been climbing for over 30 years. We recently updated our Patreon, and now you get exclusive content from the guests that you love. You get your episodes before everyone else, and they're ad-free. Try it out now at patreon.com/testpiece with a free 7-day trial. Okay, let's start the show.
I almost think there's a parallel there to like when you compete and you go out on stage, you're like, I'm a competitor, but no, you're just supposed to climb. Like you're a climber, go climb. You don't have to look like a climber. You just have to do your thing. And yeah, so, okay, that's a good start. Let's just roll into it. Melina Costanza, welcome back to the Testpiece podcast for your third time. Melina, you are the first guest to do 3 guest podcast. So congratulations. I keep having you back because I love talking to you.
That is exciting. And I feel very honored. I actually didn't realize that until this moment. So thank you for having me.
Well, I have them written down. The other ones, they are 119 and 125 for anyone who wants to go back and have a listen. And yeah, Melina, I mean, I just have a blast talking to you. I actually refer more people to your podcast than almost any other ones.
Stop, I'm blushing.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
Oh, thank you.
Well, the other side of it is that you just keep doing really cool things. So our first time we chatted, I didn't realize it, but you were prepping for nationals. And I was just blown away by your mental prep and what you were doing to prepare for nationals. And then watching you execute in nationals and win and getting to see what you talked about displayed on screen was super fun to follow along. But now it's been, I don't know, months, whatever. Yeah, I don't know how long.
Yeah, about a year, I think.
A year? Oh, man. Okay, a year. It's been a year. And then I got to see you at the World Championships, which, if I'm not mistaken, was your World Cup debut, or was that only your World Championship debut?
World Championship debut. I had done bouldering World Cups in 2022. I had done a few of them, and I think only 2. Yeah. So I hadn't had a lot of international experience in bouldering specifically. I'd done more lead World Cups over the years, but at this World Championship, I only competed in bouldering and had been my first IFSC bouldering event in years. Yeah. Which was interesting and fun, but yeah, I had a great time.
Well, spoiler alert, you podiumed. You got 3rd. That was
I did. Yeah.
Incredible. Congrats, Melina. So happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty mind-boggling experience. And I think part of the reason why I was able to go into it with kind of no inhibitions was just that I had so little experience that I didn't place any limitations on myself, if that makes sense. I just went into it with a completely open mind. And sometimes that is what it takes to allow yourself to reach that next level and to reach your potential.
Yeah, it was a stacked field too. I mean, you're competing. I mean, of course, it's World Championships. Of course, it's going to be stacked. But I just want to emphasize that podiuming at that competition, I'm not going to say, yeah, it wasn't your first time on the World Cups, but you're a different athlete than you were in 2022. Completely different.
No kidding. Yeah. I felt like my preparation was different. My mindset was different. My entire philosophy around climbing and competition was different. And I hadn't done any World Cups lead or boulder that year, I guess earlier this year. And it in some ways made me feel like there was more pressure, like I had one event to prove myself. But in other ways, no expectations. I went into it having it be the only competition I had done in months. And yeah, I was able to kind of let loose in a way that I haven't historically.
So I get this idea that when you're the underdog, in some ways you have nothing to lose, nothing to prove. You're there. No, I mean, I expected a lot from you, Melina, but I don't think anyone else did. And how do you deal with that mental shift of before you were the top dog on the national scene? It was kind of, you were expected to win, or again, at least I expected you to win, and you always do. But now you had a completely mental shift. And I understand that kind of taking that weight off your shoulders, but did that change how you just came into qualifiers, came into semis and finals?
Yeah, honestly, it is so much easier to be an underdog. Yeah, you're right. I haven't really felt that in the US in a while. And it is a privileged position to be in, going into a competition feeling like maybe there are expectations that you perform. And I appreciate the opportunity to rise to the occasion and to be able to go into these events with pressure and execute under pressure. But the World Championship was the first time in a while that it has been no expectations, so liberating. I didn't really honestly do that much mental preparation for it, which kind of is in contrast to everything we talked about in the past couple podcasts. But I went into it kind of with an open mind, blank slate. I didn't really think about anything. And I think I had the luxury of not thinking about anything, which is kind of the purest form of climbing, not just competition climbing, but climbing in general. So yeah, I would say that maybe there weren't expectations on me, but that for me was honestly the best and easiest way to compete and something I haven't felt in a while.
I'm curious, you said maybe there weren't expectations on you. And when you say that, maybe you're talking about fans like me, but did you internally have like a little inkling that I have a lot to show? Like, I mean, did you surprise yourself, or were you secretly still having a lot of pressure on yourself to perform really well?
I surprised myself, I think. I always believe in myself. I always go into competitions believing that I can make the semi, make the final, make the podium. But I didn't really think about placement at all, which was, again, liberating. I went into it every single round. The goal was to qualify for the next round. I wasn't thinking about the podium. I wasn't thinking about a medal. I wasn't thinking about anything other than the present moment and the present boulder, which I went into qualifiers a little bit rusty because I had been injured throughout the entire World Cup season. I hadn't been competing. I'd been recovering. I really didn't know where I was at. And I think other years I have been training and pushing and competing really frequently. So maybe I placed more pressure or expectations upon myself for the World Cup circuit. But this year I truly was in the dark. So everything I was doing, everything I was proving was to myself. And I just wanted to go out and do as well as I possibly could because I wanted to learn from the experience more than anything. I wanted to take away valuable tangibles from the event and go back and apply them to my own training. And in the process, I guess I kind of abandoned any sense of where am I relative to other people and only focused on where am I relative to the level of the climbs.
So what were a couple of those tangible things you took back with you?
There were several things that I was significantly better or weaker at than I had realized before. I think the level of setting is very different at the World Cup level than it is within the United States, which didn't come as much of a surprise to me. I will say that I had been practicing slab climbing and movement and coordination and power pretty relentlessly. And all of those things had been something I would have considered a weakness only a calendar year before when we were talking last about going into nationals. And I had been training slab for that competition, but I felt like that was my weakest area within bouldering. The only climb I didn't do in nationals was the slab boulder in semifinals, which I think every other finalist did, if I'm not mistaken. So it was something that I knew I had to overcome maybe this deficit, and I had been working at it so hard. And then at World Championships, I topped every single slab or vert boulder in the entire competition, which was really beyond my expectations of myself in a positive way. And then I struggled a lot grabbing slopers. I struggled a lot with really big compression. And that's been something I've been practicing a lot since the event, which that was my goal. My goal for the event was to figure out where my shortcomings are. I don't know if shortcomings is really the right word, but where I have the most room for growth. And I feel really positively about the fact that I was able to identify that I was able to pinpoint specific moves where I struggled proportionally more than other women in the field. And now I'm able to take that and apply it to my training and go into every session being like, here is where I want to put the most of my energy, because I've always been someone, my philosophy has been you're only as good as your weakest, I guess, style, your weakest element, your weakest discipline. So for me now, I'm only as good as my ability to do those really spanny, compression-y, slopey boulders. And I don't know, that's exciting to me.
Do you watch that footage? Like, do you look at it and then set boulders specifically with those kind of holds? Like, when you identify these things, is it just your memory, or do you literally go back and like watch tape and then try to address those like specifics?
It's less watching tape. It's more kind of a general feeling, especially when there is a, I guess, weakness that is recurring throughout an event or throughout a season, because it isn't one specific climb. I don't want to be a master of one climb that I've already had. I want to be finding broader themes throughout my climbing, I guess. I will remember specific holds sometimes, especially if I have to look at that hold for 4 straight minutes as I slowly slip off of it. So that, that was one of the things in the semifinal at the World Championship. There was a sloper that I just wasn't able to grab at all. You're supposed to generate into a dyno off of it, and I could barely even hold on to it without sliding off. So there are holds that I remember, and I try and get on more holds that are specifically like that, but it isn't trying to recreate or reset a specific climb. Although I have done that before when I get really frustrated about one specific move and it's a very weird, very niche move, then I'll try and reset it almost exactly because I want to prove to myself that I can do it. And it's a little bit cathartic when I'm really upset about something.
Actually, one of the things that stood out to me the most in finals was how differently you top 3 women were and how you climbed. Yanya has Yanya strength. And it really came into play on that 4th boulder where there was an almost iron cross move. And she really had that, I don't know, she both had the ability to kind of slow it down as well as keep it going volume wise at the top. Like, she seemed to have a little extra gear. And then Orion, flashed so many boulders, had just impeccable technique. And then you were somewhere in the middle, and I'm blanking on the scoring, but I remember you it looked like maybe you could have gotten 2nd or 1st until the final boulder. Am I right on that?
I don't think so. I was pretty far. Basically, Yanya had 4 tops. Orion had 3. I had 2. And then Aaron in 4th had 1, which I think is kind of a route setter's dream distribution, honestly. But yeah, I think that Orion and Yanya were, quite frankly, on a different level in that final than any of the rest of us were. I think that's only realistic. But it wasn't something that you could really tell in isolation. It was a little bit hard to know how people were doing, at least from my perspective. It is interesting looking at the dynamics between people in ISO, how people interact with one another when there is that pressure, when it is that format. But yeah, I think it was really inspiring watching them because there were climbs that took me several tries or climbs that I felt really, really far from being able to do that I was able to, at least at the end, watch Yanya do the last one, watch Orion get through that whole last section. So yeah, it was definitely a good distribution of points as far as scoring was considered, but yeah, I don't think I was close to getting 2nd or 1st.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was watching you on the 4th, and I thought if you had done it because Orion hadn't done it, that it would have, because you were close on that. Was it the 1st boulder that you ended up not topping that had that big last move?
That was the 2nd boulder.
The 2nd boulder. Okay.
That one was interesting because I was able to watch the videos afterward, and there were very specific technical things that, for example, Orion did that made it a very different move. And that's all about, I think, learning from the competition, which I also really value, is that I was trying something over and over and it felt really impossible, and then being able to watch other people do it differently. And I don't know, I think it helps with pattern recognition when you're able to see someone do it a certain way, and then you're able to potentially pick up on it in the future.
I totally remember seeing Orion do that boulder with that high heel and into an undercling. I thought, normally I can do a move like that. Like, she would have crushed him. Okay, we're getting into the weeds on the World Championships, which I don't know if everyone will remember all those boulders, but I encourage you to go back and watch it if you haven't. Something I'm curious about is you went to World Championships. You said that you had an injury that was keeping you out of the rest of the ones that year, but was your plan initially to do the whole World Cup season, or how did this year go Well, I guess injury is going to come up, but I guess I'm kind of curious about how you planned out the season and how it ended up going.
Yeah. Well, what's I think interesting is that even going into the team trials event in March, I believe, of 25, I didn't know if I wanted to do any World Cups. I felt really on the fence about it. My experience with it had been a little bit unsavory in previous years. So I don't know, maybe I was a little jaded, but I was kind of planning on just climbing outside all summer. And I did team trials and it felt really different from previous events. The setting was significantly harder than pretty much any US comp that I'd ever done. And it felt so much more fun. I had one of my favorite qualifier rounds I've ever had. It was just a complete beatdown. The whole comp was kind of a bloodbath. And I had the most fun that I've ever had competing. And I was able to go away from that event and have a conversation with myself. Like, what do I want? What do I enjoy about competing? Why haven't I enjoyed it before? And so many of those factors, I think, had to do with my fulfillment from competing. I haven't really enjoyed doing flash rounds. I feel like a lot of American comps recently have kind of been flash rounds. And I know that there are reasons for that as well. It's hard to set, I think, in general for those types of competitions. And it also is hard to like, what do you want the audience to see? It's being live streamed. Like there are pressures externally, not just what the route setters want. So it is a little bit hard. And I understand that it's not black and white, but at the same time, I recognized that the way that I would be able to scratch that itch was kind of only going to that next level. And I talked a lot with coaches. I talked a lot with friends and family. And we kind of determined that this would be the year that I'd kind of dip my toe back into the water and try and do not all the World Cups, but at least some of them. And then right before the first World Cup of the season, I tore my LCL and I didn't know how bad it was, but basically what I was told from doctors after getting the MRI is that it was grade 2, so not a complete tear, but pretty much as close to complete as it could have been is what one doctor said, which is, she said hanging on by a couple threads, which is a really gross visual, but basically it was not great and the recovery was going to be kind of minimum 12 weeks. And 12 weeks was the duration of the World Cup season for bouldering. So theoretically I could have done lead World Cups after because I did qualify for both, but I wasn't super interested in that. And I decided to put more of my eggs into the trying to go to World Championship in Korea basket at the end of the season because there were about 2 months between the last World Cup and Seoul, the World Championship. And I thought that I didn't know what physical fitness, what physical shape I'd be in, but I knew that I would try and train throughout as much as I possibly could with that goal in mind. Because I also felt like I needed a goal. I needed something to get me through injury because injury is such a psychological beatdown sometimes. If you don't know where you're going, you can just feel so lost. And I wanted to give myself a goal, even if I didn't know if it would be possible or if I would even get a spot. I wanted to give myself this goal at the end of the tunnel to kind of drive myself through the whole recovery process and keep me motivated. So yeah, I wasn't able to do the World Cup, but a silver lining, I think, was that I was able to watch a lot of my friends on the US team or from around the world doing World Cups. And I felt so much FOMO that I've never felt before. I was watching them being like, oh, I want to be there. I want to be trying the climbs. And it wasn't like, oh, I feel like I could do this well or have this placement. It was like, I want to try the climbs. I feel so jealous that they're able to try these climbs that look so fun. And I'm stuck at home on the couch. And it was like probably the single best thing that could have happened to me. And I knew in the moment maybe that was the case. I was trying to look at it from that perspective, but it motivated me like nothing else really had. And I knew then that I wanted to do it in a way that I hadn't before the injury.
When you talk to your teammates or your friends that are out there doing it, are they telling you that those boulders are harder than the nationals? Like, what's the conversation with them about what their experience is like on that circuit?
I think a lot of it is just that they're really different. The style historically has been pretty different between American competitions and World Cup competitions.
Why is that? Is it still like that? Jeez.
I think it's definitely less than it has been historically. it's a little bit hard to speak to it before you've actually gone and done the climbs there. And it's hard to know what the level is. And I've heard setters basically say that American comps are like, I think they said the words birthday party World Cup, something like that. Basically insinuating that it was significantly easier than anything you would see in a World Cup. So from my perspective, I was like, I don't know. Maybe I'm not at the level, and maybe I am. It's pretty impossible to tell until I get over there. And yeah, a lot of the feedback was that it is just different and it's like apples to oranges. It's really hard to put a grade on any competition climb, really. I think it's hard to say that it's definitively this difficult because so much of the difficulty comes from, can you read it independently in a time period that is very short, or can you do a coordination or high risk move quickly? And that isn't necessarily it is V8 or it is V10. It just, there are a lot of different stressors on you in that moment that makes something feel harder or easier than it may be. But that being said, I think that the level of at least the qualifier was pretty comparable to American comps, at least on the more movement type climbs, but the physical or overhung climbs felt several steps up, which is one of the things I felt like in American comps, I've always excelled at: the steep, the powerful, the burly. And when I got over there, it definitely felt like I had a lot of improvement left to do in those areas, which was pretty enlightening for me.
It's interesting to hear that the steep stuff that's burly is where it was a few notches harder, because when I think of historically, when people compare American climbing competitions to the World Cups, it used to be, oh, we're just kind of straightforward burly climbers, and the World Cups had another level of delicateness and movement coordination that took us for a while to catch up. But now it seems like maybe we're falling behind in the burly side. But I know it's tricky it sounds like you said apples and oranges, but can you better explain just what makes these climbs on the World Cup stage harder than the ones here in America?
Yeah, I do think that a lot of it is, I mean, like we're talking about stylistic, it is so delicate and intricate and so much about body position and where your center of gravity is relative to these holds. I think it was definitely not as different as I think people had been telling me the entire time, which was kind of one of the things that made me, I guess, apprehensive about doing World Cups, because so many people said it's so different. But I do think that the work that setters have been doing, especially like in the TC and at gyms in Salt Lake, I think there are a lot of really, really good setters in commercial gyms. And I felt like that prepared me pretty well for, like I said, the slab and vert type climbs. It also changes a little bit season to season and comp to comp, depending on what setters are at a given venue or what the trends are between seasons. So it's hard to say. It's hard to very specifically put a pin in what a climb looks like on a World Cup stage versus in an American comp. But I do think that there have been a lot more resources available to the athletes in the US that have prepared them better for those more movement coordination type climbs.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience climbing on comp setting, or I should say the modern day comp setting, because I used to compete and it was just, more classic climbing. But something that was always really hard for me is that I would see people do these, I don't know, big moves or dynamic moves, and then I would get on and the foot would be just turned a little wrong or a little higher than I thought it should be. And it's like the hold was okay, but not when I had to really get up on the foot, or something that just, in some ways, it would look really normal to me. And then when my body got on it, it would say like, this is just off. Like there's something wrong here. And so I'm just using this perhaps as an analogy to, it's hard to like describe what makes things different, but it's like, I guess you feel it when you climb it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. A lot of times when I was younger, I think everything in competition climbing felt very comfortable, very ergonomic. Everything was exactly, like you said, where you want it to be in the orientation that you wanted it to be in. And that definitely is not the case when you do World Cups. But I also do think that within the US, that has been changing as well. Maybe not as quickly, but they are converging at least.
Or I feel like I'm supposed to talk about how you're now outdoor climbing, and really hard climbs typically have that same thing. You're like, oh, the hold's right there, but it's a little further. But before we go outdoors, because I'm excited for that, to hear about this era of yours too, I want to hear a little bit more about the injury and the mentality, and how you trained while having this kind of like unknown. And I feel like I should also make some bad joke about, hopefully you didn't hurt it playing basketball with AJ, but LCL, probably not basketball. But yeah, when you first got injured and you were about to do World Cups, like, was that devastating? And then how did you switch your mentality so quickly to like, well, it's 12 weeks and I can train, and then there's World Championships. Like, that's a really big shift in mentality. Go from woe is me to here's my goal, I'm working towards it. Like, it sounds easy, but it's not.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that made it a little bit easier for me personally was that I really love a long, uninterrupted training block. And it's pretty rare that you're afforded those given the competition schedule and the outdoor season. I think sometimes it's almost like we want to be performing year round, and that just isn't how any other sport operates. Pretty much every sport has some sort of off season. And in climbing, there is an off season, but there's an off season if you don't climb outside, but that is the prime time to climb outside if you want to take advantage of that. So having those 12 weeks where I was like, I can do a full training cycle exactly the way that I wanted to was honestly exciting in a way. Maybe it was me just trying to look on the bright side of a situation that I wasn't particularly happy about, but at the same time, it was something that I've wanted to do for a while, and sometimes circumstances just afford you the opportunity to do things a little bit differently than you were planning. So I injured myself on a board, actually, which is kind of surprising because I was heel hooking, which you don't do a lot of on boards. At least you're not really supposed to. But it was one of those days where it was like my third session of the day. I was like really...
Third session of the day, Malia?
It wasn't something that I would
typically... I do 3 sessions a week, yeah.
It wasn't something that I would typically do. It was just sometimes you get a little bit carried away. Sometimes your day, you wouldn't schedule it that way if you had a whole free day, but I had work and I had appointments, and it was like I got a little bit here and a little bit there, and I had to take what I could get. But when you're doing that inherently, you're warming up and cooling down and warming up and cooling down, and it's hard to sometimes regulate where your body is at. And you can fatigue more quickly or slowly than you realize. And it was just one of those weird kind of perfect storms where, you know, how you're always like, oh, it's my last try of the day, and then I'll call it. On my last try of the day, I was rocking really deep over a heel, and I just felt it rip, and I knew immediately that it was really bad, but I don't know. Sometimes you want to just think that it is in your head. And I was able to, fortunately, through USA Climbing and the sponsorship with Intermountain Health, I was able to get an MRI the next day and get my results back within 2 or 3 days from getting injured.
Wow.
Which was kind of insane, honestly. But I knew what I was working with. I think the hardest part sometimes with an injury is when there are unknowns. You don't know how hard you can push yourself. You don't know what the next steps are. And it's hard to be motivated in that circumstance, I think. So I was able to figure everything out quickly, get my ducks in a row, and create a training plan for myself. One thing that helped is that I did go to Hawaii for a week. So sometimes when you're just really bummed, I canceled my trip to Europe for the World Cup, and with those miles, I bought a trip to Hawaii for a week. So Alex and I went, and we got really tan, and we worked out in the gym there, but it wasn't like a training trip. It was like purely relaxation. We were both working, but we were working by the beach, which is so much better. And then we came home, and it was like, all right, hard reset. All this weird shit happened. We took a break, and now it's back to regularly scheduled programming, as regular as we can make it look. And I had the guidance of doctors, but I will preface this by saying this is not a medical recommendation. I did things not by the book, and I did things probably taking a little bit more of a risk. But like I said, I was putting my eggs in the basket of I want to go to World Championship, and I'm not going to go there if I'm not ready. I'm not going to go there if I don't think that I have the potential to perform the way that I want to perform. So I was taking risks under that assumption. I was weighing out what are the risks of me potentially falling from a certain height and injuring myself versus the risk that I go over there and I don't feel the way that I want to feel. So it ended up being, I don't know, it paid off for me, but I was board climbing pretty much the entire time. I didn't tell my doctors that, but I was wearing a brace, climbing one leg. And I do think that actually is a really helpful training tool, is like learning what you can do in situations that are uncomfortable. Like we said, there are sometimes things that feel really uncomfortable or not ergonomic or something is off. And climbing with one foot naturally creates those situations because you can't stabilize your body as well. You have to generate momentum in really different ways. And I spent probably 6 weeks not able to use my other foot at all. Wow. So I was only 1 foot board climbing at like 55 or 60 degrees on a tension or kilter board. And I got way, way stronger really quickly. And I also was doing a hypertrophy block in my weightlifting. So I was just like lifting more reps, eating more food, just trying to like put on as much muscle as possible, which was another thing that I haven't ever really been able to do just because of the nature of the day-to-day cycle of climbing and training and how competitions are interspersed with like outdoor trips. But yeah, I spent 12 weeks trying to just get as strong as physically possible. And I think that it was super fun, honestly, which made it a lot easier to reckon with the injury. And by the end of the 6 weeks, when they're like, you can start using your other foot, I was like, nah, I'm good.
Okay, Melina, I love talking with you because of the peek into your mindset as an elite competitor. It's just blows my mind, the tone of your voice, how you handled the injury, how you got excited for the training block. It made me think of this Latin phrase. It's called amor fati. It means love fate. And it's just, and I think like the subtext is something like not merely to bear what happens, but to like actively embrace it. And so just hearing you say like, oh, I got hurt and I'm like excited to train, because when I get hurt, it's hard for me to follow some training plan. Like if I hurt my knee, shouldn't I just do hangboarding, climb one arm? But it's very hard for someone to recognize that this is temporary. This is an isolated thing that they can deal with in one leg, and then give it their all. And that's actually a good thing to emphasize there. Is it's one thing to show up and kind of half-ass, get on top rope and, just get into the gym and act like you're doing something. It's another to actually get stronger, come back stronger in the other ways that you were allowed to train. So I don't know if there's a question there. I'm just amazed. I'm just impressed that you were able to flip that switch and really make it a productive 12 weeks instead of a huge setback. And you came out into a fairy tale finish, really.
Yeah, I think so much of it comes down to your perspective and also what do you like about climbing? Because for me, the thing that I like most is the challenge. I like when something is challenging to get from the bottom to the top, and there's a reward inherently in trying and failing and trying and failing and eventually doing something. And in my mind, that doesn't change when I have one leg, for example. It doesn't change because maybe I'm doing something proportionally easier, but it feels as hard, like I'm doing something that is an easier grade, but it is more challenging or as challenging as something that I would be doing otherwise. So why shouldn't it be the exact same psychology behind it? Sometimes you can get bogged down by the grade, bogged down by the circumstances, bogged down by comparing yourself to other people. And maybe I wasn't climbing, I wasn't able to do coordination moves. I wasn't able to try things in the gym that were above a certain height. I wasn't really able to fall at all for the first month. But there are ways to create challenges for yourself. And if that is what you like about the sport, if you're inherently addicted to the process as opposed to the results or as opposed to the comparisons at the end, I think you're able to reframe it as something that is still as fun and rewarding. It's hard because you are human, like you have goals that look a certain way on paper, and those can all change and you have to reframe very quickly. But I think it comes down to the fact that at the end of the day, yeah, I wanted to do World Cups, but I just really, really like training, and I like trying hard, and I like failing, and I like getting back up. And if anything, it gave me more of an opportunity to fail and get back up than I would normally have. So I definitely have a different psychology around it than other people, and a very different psychology than I used to have. And I think I've grown a lot as an athlete and as a person just over the past handful of years, the way that I approach sport climbing in general. So,
yeah, we touched on that in the last couple of episodes, but maybe you can just kind of highlight what that change was, and maybe, what competition used to be like for you, and the joy that you kind of seem to have with it now.
Yeah, I think I used to be so hard on myself. I really liked winning, and winning at all costs.
You too?
But at the same time, it was like I was never satisfied unless I was perfect. And I would come away from competitions, even ones that I won, and I would be so hard on myself. I wouldn't be able to like process the fact that I hadn't done a climb that someone else had done, for example, and I would compare myself to other people, and I wouldn't let myself show any weakness in the gym. It was almost a facade. I was idealizing this version of myself that didn't really exist. Whereas now I've realized that it just is, life is too short, and climbing is something that should be fun. And it sounds too simple almost, but I think that kind of goes back to like when you're a child and you're doing something like climbing or any sport or anything that brings you joy, you do it for the sake of the joy of it. You don't necessarily do it because you compare yourself to other people or because you want to get a medal at the end. It's the joy of the action and the joy of the process. And I have started competing with that same ideology where it's like, I do what I enjoy. I only sign up for things that I want to do. And if I'm going to go out there, I'm going to try as hard as I can, and I'm going to be proud of my effort and not my performance. And if I don't succeed in certain ways, I'm going to take those and grow from those, because what I really want at the end of the day is to be the best climber that I can be. And I can't become that person unless I experience failures and experience setbacks and take those in stride and learn from them. And if I take them and I beat myself up about them, it'll only affect my confidence going into the next one. And so I go into every single competition believing that I can be topping every single boulder, but every boulder I don't top, I take a lesson away from instead of punishing myself for at this point.
Quick break while I tell you about today's sponsor. Thank you to all the patrons who help make this show possible. Join them so you can get episodes early before anyone else, and those episodes are ad-free. As a patron, you also get to submit questions for upcoming guests. The answers to those questions are only available to patrons. Follow the link in the show notes to join now. You also get access to a private Discord where you'll find me and other people who want to go from good to great. Okay, back to the pod. Yeah, all this is really connected to that kind of subjective enjoyment, because if it really is all about pushing your limits and getting confronted with something that's hard for you, whether it's because you only are using one leg or because it's the pinnacle of your ability in that moment, whatever that moment means, whether you're 70 years old too or something. And if that's what you seek enjoyment from, which I really think we all actually do deep down, I know that some of my greatest experiences in climbing, it does not correlate with the grade that the climb had, but the experience was difficult and meaningful. And if you're not looking to chase that, then you're going to fail. Because by definition, if it's at the pinnacle of your ability in that moment, you can't have success on every try that you reach for that pinnacle. And that's what makes it special too. And so there's something really cool there. It's a good reminder. And I often say to myself, this line that you had in, I think it was the first podcast. It was this idea that pressure is a privilege. And I used it on myself yesterday. I was outdoors climbing and I was struggling, and I was like, I really want to ascend. And I had all the pressure of my
my next try because it was the last time I was going to be out there before the snow came. And I didn't do it, but I had fun with it. I was like, you know what? Like, this is special. I get to be out here. I get to try something really hard. And even if it doesn't go perfectly, and at the very least, I had a fun try. And I think all of that is how you can kind of swallow the intense pressure that you get put under, whether it's you're on boulder or, on the world championship stage.
Yeah. And I also think it's cool because like, as long as you put the maximum amount of effort into it, as long as you try your hardest, realistically, what can you regret? And I don't know, there have been times when I've held myself back because I've tried so hard to be perfect and to not fall at all, or to like, I don't know, do something and make it look easy, that I haven't put all my effort and energy into something. And I feel like that is where you can have those regrets. But if you're coming out of the other end and you're like, I didn't succeed, but I tried my hardest. And because I tried my hardest, I now have learned so much more. Because if you don't try your hardest, you'll never know what you could have done, what you could have accomplished.
So I remember that idea, be scrappy. It was the word you used, and I love it. You got to try hard no matter what it looks like. How do you balance that with not getting injured or even coming back from an injury? Like, let's say you're on boulder number 4, vying for the podium on world championships, and it's a deep heel hook. And I don't know, I'm sure you would have some reservations about that. How do you balance ultimate try hard with injury management?
That is something that I think I haven't quite figured out yet personally. I think in general, I'm always on the side of like redlining. I will try as hard as I possibly can, and I'll come off the wall and not even realize that I'm injured until like minutes later when my adrenaline has kind of gone down. I haven't figured out a balance yet. I'm imagining that with age and with experience, that's something that I will kind of be forced to figure out. But at this stage in my life, I don't know, you see a lot of these young NBA stars, for example, they'll be like going up and dunking on other players every single drive to the basket. And people are saying they're going to get hurt, or like quarterbacks in the NFL who they're like scrambling and taking really big hits every single play. And all of their like older peers are like, you're going to need to stop doing that. You have a long career ahead of you. You have to be managing those injuries and those risks. But when you're young, you feel invincible. I feel like I definitely had that throughout my youth, and honestly, maybe still now. And I haven't figured out what the correct balance is. I'm always going to be someone who wants to push to the limit. And I have a really, really hard time holding myself back no matter the circumstances. In general, I try and make myself warm up better, especially for those moves that, like, for example, like heel hooks. I've been trying to like activate the glutes and the hamstrings and do my stretches before getting on to kind of mitigate risks that way. That way, when I'm on the wall, I don't have to think about it at all. But for me, that was also one of the reasons why I said I don't even want to start trying to climb with 2 legs. I'm good climbing with 1, is because I knew the second I put the other leg on, I wouldn't be able to hold myself back. I wouldn't be able to stop and manage the risk in a safe way. And I almost wanted to be like, no, I'll just wait till it's fully healed. I'll wait till I don't have a risk so that I don't have to worry about that. It's something that I think I, as an athlete, could really benefit from, is learning how I'm able to like approach those situations in a way that is more conducive to a long career that is a lot healthier. But at this point, long story short, I don't know. That isn't a question that I can answer.
Yeah. Well, I hope you never have to figure it out in a way, because sometimes you don't get hurt, and it's actually one of the things that was so tough for me to deal with injuries was not the pain, not even, the recovery. Sometimes it was just the difficulty that it presented in getting back into that flow state of just when you talked about quarterbacks taking big hits or whatever the thing is and just going for it. I don't even know if it's that you feel invincible, and maybe I'm putting words in their mouth or your mouth, but just it's that's not what your mind is on. You're doing the thing. You're climbing or you're playing the game, and that may be part of it or part of the consequences, but that's not where your focus is. Your focus is on the moment. And that's what I love too, is being in that flow state and just trying hard. And it was always rough for me to have a little, like a mom on my shoulder saying like, be careful with that Gaston. It could hurt your shoulder. And you're like, shut up, mom. I just want to do my thing, And so I don't know. I don't know if you can slow down. Sometimes you're just forced to, but it does seem like a lot of the best competitors, I even think about Yanya when she hurt her finger on boulder number 4 in the Olympics, and then she had the lead climb in front of her. And my hunch is she just climbed, on the lead, I mean, and that's what you got to do sometimes. And, so maybe that's part and parcel with being a great.
Yeah, I think so. I think also it's like, given the situation, like with her, she's at the Olympics. This is the pinnacle. Like, you can rest after, you can heal after, and maybe you make it a little bit worse, but this is what you've been working for. And I think sometimes the competition isn't worth it. Sometimes the training day isn't worth it. If you're experiencing injury symptoms in just a normal training day, maybe some people pull back, maybe some people try and gun it forward. At the end of the day, it's just a decision that each person kind of has to make independently, given their own values and their own circumstances.
Yeah. Although I'm here to provide medical advice, and that's don't get hurt. Like, it just sucks, because it's very different to say like you're vying for the gold medal in the Olympics and your finger tweak might be made worse. It's another that I just feel like it's typically not worth it to ever push it too hard. So be careful out there, unless you have that, unless somehow you can switch your mindset and just saying, yeah, great, uninterrupted 12-week training block, and then you come out stronger. But okay, amazing job at the World Championships. You were on the podium with Orion and Yanya, 2 of the best climbers in the world right now. What is that doing to your psyche for the next year? Are you now excited about the, I say upcoming World Cup season? It's still a ways away, but yeah, how is that changing what 2026 looks like for you?
Well, I still have to qualify to compete in 2026. So at this point,
really,
it is about nationals and it is about team trials. Every year it's a little bit different. As of now, I didn't do any of the other World Cups, so I don't know what my ranking was. I think, having only done World Champs, it's around 20th or so in the world, but top 10 by the USA Climbing protocol is what you would need to have to get the automatic bye. And this year, I think what's interesting is that, as far as I'm aware, only Annie has that in men or women, lead or boulder. So this nationals and team trials will be a lot more interesting than it has been in previous years in both men and women, just given the fact that you will have people who in previous years have had byes competing at these championship events, which I think is really exciting. I think it is a good opportunity for the rest of the field in the US to know kind of how they compare to the world's elites. Like, you're looking at like Brooke and Colin and Natalia and Jesse Grouper. Like, there are some really incredible athletes who have come out of the US who have been a little bit absent from the USA climbing scene for the past several years, who will be making an appearance now. And I think that does benefit the rest of the field. I think all of us should be really excited to see how this year plays out, just because we get the opportunity to climb with people who are really good and really experienced, and to see what does that look like.
How many spots are granted for each discipline and gender?
I want to say 6, because now, okay, don't quote me on this. I don't honestly 100% know how it works. I believe that each country has a cap of 6 in any discipline, any gender. So, for example, 6 bouldering women. And one of those spots is taken by Annie because USA Climbing has guaranteed her the spot since she finished top 10. But I guess that would leave 5 spots available on US team, which would be granted at team trials with an average of nationals and team trials points. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I never really know how anything works. My friends and family are a lot more attuned to all of that. But for me, it's like, I'm going to go and do as well as I can regardless. I don't think it's important that I know how it works. It's not going to change my strategy. My strategy is just to do the boulders. And so that's how I show up. But I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Other people are far more knowledgeable than I am.
Despite loving watching all these comps, I have no idea what that behind the scenes is. And it changes too. I mean, I think that's
it changes
a
lot year to year, which is what makes it so difficult for people to follow. I imagine it'll stabilize at some point, both from like the federation level and the international level. But for now, it is still a little bit changing season to season. I think that is also a factor of the Olympic format changing year to year based on how many different disciplines there are and the quota allotments, all that. I think the organizations within different federations and I guess it's called World Climbing now, not the IFSC.
Ooh, good catch. There you go.
I think that they're just trying to adapt to the different formats, but as everything stabilizes, I imagine there's a future where we aren't having to relearn the rules year to year.
We were talking about just competition climbing on the group podcast that I do here called Good Temps. And I just wish that there was like a camera crew going around telling stories like your story, because I said on there that when I watch World Championships, you know, I've talked to you for over a year now and I got to follow you. I mean, you had a fairy tale story when we first chatted because you had had success at nationals, gotten injured, taken a break, had another good showing at nationals, had another good showing when I talked to you. And then, you know, now you've had an injury and then you have a debut in world. It makes it so fun to follow you. And I know that, you know, if you look at Brooke's story or Natalia's story or, you know, any of their stories, it would be so exciting. And so I'm just putting it out into the ether that someone should make like a F1 Drive to Survive for at least USAC, because, you know, I mean, even just what we've talked about here, it's fascinating what you've been through and this amazing result you just had. And now you have to go back into the grinder. You know, you have to go to nationals and you're going to compete against some high level athletes that are now entering back in after that Olympic kind of hangover that they went through. And it's going to be cutthroat. I can't wait to watch. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the best years for everyone. And I think it is going to be really exciting. I hope that it gets viewership, because I do think that, yeah, there will be those narratives, but it'll also just be good climbing. It'll be hopefully really hard route setting. I think that having so many really talented and successful athletes in the pool will hopefully incentivize people to make it really hard to try and get like real separation between those athletes. So we'll see.
Okay, well, we'll leave it on that cliffhanger, the comp side of things, and let's talk a little bit more about outdoors, because since we last spoke, you've done multiple V14s, but also you were still a little on the fence, at least in the first podcast. You were like, well, I mean, it's kind of cold out there. You got to hike around. It's probably really sharp, you know, and then maybe AJ had nudged you a bit more in between the time of that first and second one. But since then, you've been crushing. And yeah, just tell me about your outdoor evolution this past year.
Yeah, I was very anti-nature for most of my life up until this past year, which I'm sure was painful for Alex because she loves nature. She loves climbing outside. She prefers climbing outside to competition climbing, even though she has had so much success indoors as well. But I'm sure it was brutal dating a climber who doesn't like dirt. But yeah, more recently, I've been pushing myself to get outside my comfort zone. I definitely choose boulders that are on the more roadside end of things just because I still do not enjoy or appreciate the hike. I've gotten a little bit better. I twice in the past week have hiked like 20 minutes up to a boulder, which is a lot for me.
Very impressive.
Thanks. I definitely have been more motivated, and I've been more motivated to seek out boulders independently. It initially was just Alex showing me videos being like, I think you would like this. I've done this climb, or friends have done this climb, or I found this on Instagram. Take a look at it. I was kind of just along for the ride, and I would show up to the boulder and get on what people told me to get on and try. But yeah, more recently, I've been kind of trying to find boulders independently that I like, or just trying to dabble in a lot more styles, because outdoors is so different from indoor climbing that I didn't really know what my style even was. I had an idea of what it was, which is really small, sharp crimps. But the more I've been climbing outside, I've had more success in places like Little Cottonwood, where it's notoriously a lot more about body position and grabbing friction and weird holds that aren't very comfortable. And I don't know, I've been trying to dabble in a lot more styles just to figure out what I like and what I dislike. And it's been fun. I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, but to really feel like a beginner again, like every single time I go outdoors, I have no idea how it's going to go. I don't know if I'm even going to be able to, I don't know, figure out where the climb goes, what the holds are. And I feel like sometimes technically I'm so far behind in some ways in a way that is really exciting because it is a new frontier for me to really push my own development forward.
You talked about different styles and, finding ones that you might excel at. But when you are now perhaps searching out your own boulders, what's attracting you to those boulders? Because it's not always just, oh, this is in my style. Sometimes things grab you for other reasons.
Yeah, it used to be, this has a hard grade and I think I could do it. Therefore, I'm going to try it. And more recently, it's been, this looks really interesting. There are unique moves, unique holds that I haven't really seen before. I want to try something new that pushes me outside of my element in certain ways, or places where I could be creative. Because I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about climbing inside is that you are presented with a climb that you have to figure out. It's almost like you're problem solving. And sometimes that is a little bit lost climbing outside because there are so many beta videos, for example, you can figure out pretty much exactly how to do something before you ever even touch the wall, which is so different from anything that I'm used to. But I don't know, it presents its own challenges because you have to figure out this person is taller, this person is stronger in these ways or more technical in these ways. Maybe that foot doesn't work for me, but something else does. Why can't I do it when they can do it? And I feel like I can do something that they can do. And I think it's psychological in very different ways. But yeah, I like to find climbs where I think there are opportunities for me to figure something out because at the end of the day, that is what I find the most rewarding.
It's so funny to hear you say that you're looking to be more creative outside and that you often find it inside because, well, actually, I was going to ask you, when I take people outside who have mainly climbed inside, often I feel like I'm kind of starting them out by marionetting them up, saying like, this is where the foot is, because they're used to tape or they're used to just like only having one option. But then you see them push past that and say, I can use anything, it's up to me. And so it's funny to hear, at first you kind of looking at outdoors as almost being more simple, where I always thought of it as kind of infinite compared to indoors, but maybe those really tricky comp boulders, it's fun watching people use volumes and use things in a way that a good comp boulder seems to get topped in 5 different ways, which is just amazing setting, but hopefully good outdoor boulders are like that too.
Yeah, and I think that, at face value, maybe outdoors there are more options, and I think it depends on the rock style, on the grade, on so many different factors, but that is one of the things I love about indoor climbing, comp climbing, is, like you mentioned, volumes. There's such a good way to make you think outside the box because maybe it's just different body positions than you've ever been in and you're having to push through really uncomfortable situations. Your first time ever trying something and you have no input from the crowd, no input from videos or from anything else. I feel like to me, that's always felt like the purest form of climbing, but transitioning to climbing outside and being able to figure out things independently, I don't know. I wouldn't stop myself from watching a video to recreate that experience. I wouldn't deliberately avoid beta or videos or anything that would kind of give me a hint as to what I should do because I've tried doing that and it is really sometimes not fun at all. But I do think that there is something to be said about climbs that have just more options and sequences where people do things really differently, or I can figure something out that is different from anything that I've seen someone else do. That is just exciting for me, I think, being able to like try something differently.
So tell me some of the highlights of this year in climbing outdoors, either problems or trips you went on, different rocks that you finally got to, or different rock types, I should say, that you got to finally experience.
One of the highlights was going to Bishop last year. I had been in my childhood, but wasn't really that into it like I mentioned, not really that into the nature of it or just anything about the experience.
Just those beautiful mountains, the perfect weather, the snow capped, and yeah, of course, I hear you.
It was very different, and I went into it with a different mindset. And I tried things that I was never open to trying before, or that I didn't even think I would want to try. I did a highball, which was something that I literally would never have done before. We talked a lot about risk management before. In some ways, I am tolerant of risk, and in some ways, I am extremely risk averse. And in the highball sense, I'm extremely risk averse. But I made myself do a highball for the first time ever, and I was like shitting myself the whole time. It was like not that fun in the moment, but I felt so empowered having done it that I feel like it was a milestone in my climbing. My mom was horrified.
Which one?
Direct North. I worked it from the bottom a little bit. When we got there to Bishop, I was like really ill. So I was like, I can't hike anywhere hard. This is like, we went to the Grandma Peabody, which is like a couple 100 feet from the car. And
I was uphill,
like,
though. Yeah.
It is uphill, but I was like heaving at the end. I was like, I'm too weak to make it up here. And so I was just kind of working moves on it because it was close to the car. And then it ended up going better than I expected. And slowly, we were there for 2 weeks. And by the time I was like over feeling sick, I was like, actually, I'm like pretty close to doing this climb. So we ended up spending 2 weeks never leaving the Grandma, which is like a little bit lame because I had other goals. I really wanted to see other climbs. But at the end of the day, it was like pretty cool to do something so outside my comfort zone. Yeah, Alex was like, it is literally V0. The top out is literally V0. You can do it. But I was just so afraid.
I just got to set this context because when people hear high balls, Bishop is famous for them. And I thought you were going to say Jedi mind tricks. I don't know. Saigon, something that was more moderate, but still tall and classic. Direct North is a V14. Direct North is it finishes Direction, which is a classic V13, into a kind of exciting V8 called Magnetic North that has this high heel hook. And even though that V0 top out is V0, it's a little like frictiony. It's not like a jug haul. It's a little exciting if I remember correctly.
No, I don't even think I grabbed a hold. I was only on my feet, which was what made it the scariest. Is like, you should not be falling. There's like pretty much no world where you should be falling. But at the end of the day, you do go, the top is like 45 feet above the ground, and it's totally gets in your head in a way that I knew it would, but I didn't know if I'd be able to push through. I was like, I'm going to have the most epic down climb bail ever if I can't get myself to do this. And I put myself in the position. I did the 8. I did Magnetic North.
Correct.
Is that what it's called? Yeah. Yep. Before.
So good too, by the way.
Yeah. Cause I was like, if I can't make myself do this, then there's no point even trying the 14, right? So I made myself do it that one time, and I was like, okay, I did something that I can't believe that I never would otherwise would have done. Now it's like game on. And I feel like that just like liberated me to actually be giving like really good scent burns.
I also got to point out Magnetic North kind of hard at V8 because it's really just a one move. You kind of like surf out to a crimp. God, it's been a long time since I've done. And then I think you kind of hand, foot, heel. And so as a result, you're somewhat horizontal, probably like 15 feet up, something like that. I don't know, like high enough up that you do not want to, I mean, you can fall there, of course, but you would not want to have your hand pop and have like a back splat from up there. And I just remember it being a committing type of move up there.
And I did on one burn from the start of Direct North. I backsplatted from that move because I completely numbed out. God. And it was the most devastated thing. It was just horrible, honestly, all around. And then there was a snowstorm, so I couldn't go back out for 4 days. I was sitting there just stewing for 4 straight days, being like, sometimes you get in your head, you're like, what if I never do it? Like, what if that was the go and I blew it? When logically that doesn't make any sense. You know, I'm like, I have 4 rest days. I should definitely be able to do it next time. And the conditions were like not good. And there were like so many things, but I was like, that was the go. I blew the go. And now I'm never going to do it. And now I'm never going to climb V14. Like, you can let yourself kind of spiral. Yeah, and I've talked so much about mindset on this podcast in terms of comps, but this type of mindset was so novel to me because when you're competing, the climb ceases to exist if you don't do it in 4 minutes. So realistically, you never have to think about it again. You never have to try it again. But the rock exists forever. Like, you can go back to it anytime for the rest of your life, basically. And that was just such a crazy paradigm shift for me, where I'm like, now I have to think about it and I can't sleep because I'm thinking about it, because it exists still and it's still there for me to conquer.
Yeah, it's so weird because in some ways comps are easy mentally in the sense that it just happens. Like, this is the date, you show up, they call your name, you do it. And you could argue that like it can be haunting when things don't go well. They can haunt you because you don't get to go back. But then similarly, it's like on the other side of the spectrum, when it's always there, it's like it's always there. And if you have to somehow move on from it for whatever reason, you decide you can't do it, like it's still there kind of taunting you. And
yeah. I like that you said the date comes for a comp, because that is something. It's pretty much everything is outside of your control. The only thing you can do is show up and climb. Whereas, it's like, is this the right day? Am I strong enough? With a comp, it doesn't matter. The comp is there. You don't get to get stronger. You don't get to put it off. The comp has arrived. And here it's like, is my skin good enough? Is the temperature perfect? Am I feeling fit enough? Is, the weather permitting for, I don't know. There's so many different factors that you're almost trying to find the exact perfect moment. But sometimes you hold yourself back so much by waiting for that moment to come instead of creating that moment for yourself.
Or I'm just totally going to ask a really deep, specific question on this climb because I know it quite well and have not done it despite trying plenty of times. How did you do the Thunderbird move? So Thunderbird is the stand to direction. Direction is the sit to Thunderbird. And then when you top it out on magnetic north, it's called direct north, which sounds all crazy and contrived. But the truth is, direct north is probably it's the king line of the boulder, in that you sit down and basically you go straight up all the way at the top of a 45-foot tall boulder. But how'd you end up doing that Thunderbird move, which is kind of the crux?
Yeah, I think it was just right foot on and then just launched. I just snagged it and then swung the foot over into a heel out left. Yeah. I spent the first day on the climb trying to figure out a way to do it statically, because I was like, what if I can't repeat it? What if it's like I get too tired from the beginning and I can't latch it? And then at the end of the day, I was like, I need to put like more respect on my name, like I can do this move. I need to be like, I don't know. I have to like remember that I can do these things that are hard. I don't need to find an alternate way. I can just do it the way that it is. So I just committed to the latch, and it felt hard at first and then slowly more and more repeatable.
It makes me think this thing. I was talking to Ollie Tor, and he's a founder of Lattice, and he was saying how people often pigeonhole themselves, especially it starts early on in their career. They're like, oh, I'm not strong, I need to technique everything, or I'm strong, I have bad technique. And then even when they work on it, sometimes they'll pigeonhole themselves. Could be 10 years later and they're like, no, I can't do the strong thing. I need to do it static. It's like, maybe you just can't. Maybe just go for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are guilty of that. You create these narratives in your head. Sometimes it's like, you need to go into it blank slate, because every climb is different and you have no idea what you can and can't do until you try.
Well, a good one. I hope you head back to Bishop again this year and stray away from just Grandma Peapie. Good boulder. Bishop has a lot to offer.
Yeah, there are a lot more things that I would like to try. And I have a lot of things that I still want to try there. I hope that I can get out to it relatively soon. There's just always the push and pull of like, it's time to start training for comps though. Like, I can keep putting it off and I can keep trying these climbs outside, and I would love to do that, but I want to go into the comps feeling good. And I don't know. I am always conflicted. And that is something that never was an issue for me before, but nowadays is something that causes me deep distress.
Yeah, I'm sure you've noticed Yanya and Brooke doing amazing things lately outdoors. I mean, groundbreaking things. And, their background is in comps. Like, what do you think about seeing them doing world first female ascents at the highest level lately?
I think it's super, super inspiring, especially because I think there are a lot of people who discredit comp climbers as people who are primarily outdoor climbers who don't think that comp climbing is legitimate, but you see people who have predominantly been comp climbers. I mean, Brooke has a pretty long history of climbing hard things outside, but Yanya hasn't historically, and suddenly she's going outside and doing V15 in a handful of tries, which is pretty insane. I don't think anyone could ever say that at this point she isn't pretty much the greatest climber on earth. But you see that, and then it's really, really hard to deny that comp climbing and comp climbers do have what it takes outside and are strong and are very capable. So I think in that sense, it's cool. I also think that from a comp climber's perspective, looking at someone and being like, they're able to take time away, and this is how they're decompressing. This is another thing that brings them joy. There are so many different ways to enjoy the sport, and you can be at the highest level and not be in the gym every single day without any other form of purpose. I think it is good for everyone. I think those are really good role models within the community.
We often hear this idea that they're decompressing or having fun, but I'm always excelled at indoors. I mean, I'm not terrible outdoors, but for whatever reason, probably because I climb indoors so much, that's what it was like living in a big city and working. And what I found is that when I went outdoors for a season, or, I had like weekend after weekend after weekend, I did a lot better indoors. Like, do you find that there's crossover and help in your comp climbing over and above just if you had spent that time doing another 12-week training block?
I do. I think that it has helped me a lot with especially tension through moves, through the feet. So much of comp climbing is pretty wild uses of momentum and trying to manipulate your momentum as you transition between several different holds, for example. But so much of outdoor climbing is how do you freeze almost all of your body and then move one limb to the next hold. And that is something that arises in comp climbing, and it's kind of a lost art. I think sometimes you see there'll be like a V7 crimp line in a comp, and pretty much no one will do it because everyone's expecting and training for different types of climbs. And I don't know, I think that it has helped me a lot. I think there are ways that my technique, especially footwork, is so good at the rapid, like, shuffling across the volume, or like volume walking, pinching, or I don't know, stemming between really big macros. But then when it comes to just putting your foot on a hold, keeping tension, and then pushing through it and maintaining tension as you go to another hold, it's the most simple form of climbing, and somehow it poses the most difficulty for me, and I think a lot of indoor climbers, as the style has changed. So it has helped me a lot. I think that there's a lot of value to it. And I'm hopeful that doing both will continue to help me progress in the other. So yes, I do think that there's value, but at the end of the day, I feel like there is more value for specifically comp climbing in going to the gym and doing repeats on those types of very specific slab movements. It's hard sometimes to get enough volume outdoors as well, just by nature of your skin being a limiting factor. Although I went outdoors 3 days ago to Ogden, which is just north of Salt Lake, and had a pretty mega 5-hour day of, I think I did like 5 double-digit boulders for the first time. And I just got so completely wrecked that I was like, hey, maybe there is something to, like, I can go climb outside and get a workout as long as it's not like completely tearing up my skin. I think you sometimes just have to figure out what works for you and your own personal training. So I don't know. I'd like to think I can keep bouncing back and forth. I do think it's a challenge for my skin to keep adapting to one and then suddenly going back to the other.
Yeah, Bishop is not the place. Bishop Buttermilks is not the place to do 5-hour mega sessions of volume.
Probably not.
Although I'll tell you what, if you do that a few times, you grow this layer of skin that is mind blowing and does let you just grab those crystals in a way that you never dreamed possible.
That's so cool.
I love that you called out this idea of keeping tension on a foot throughout a movement. I feel like this is one of the keys to climbing hard. And I don't know, maybe it's a little less in indoor climbing, but it still exists where you're moving dynamically, but somehow you have to keep pressure on the foot because you're going to need it when you latch that thing, but you're not just rocking up onto it slowly. You're generating from it, somehow pushing all the way through the movement and connecting when you get it. And I just think that that's a high level skill that I don't know how to teach it, or I don't know if there's any tips there, but it's just understanding that to keep a foot on something is to keep tension throughout the movement. And yeah, that was a big unlock for me in climbing, was just learning how to not just generate, or learning how to kind of like snag it at full extension with tension, but how to keep that pressure consistent so it didn't pop off. And, you know, something like on that Thunderbird move, like, you know, even though your foot typically does come off at the end, kind of the key for me, at least, to make that move more manageable is to keep pressure all the way through the move. And yeah, no, I like that you called that out, because I feel like that's a double digit technique right there.
And it also is one of those things where, like, yeah, it's hard to like really put it into words. It's hard to practice it other than just going out and doing it. Like sometimes you climb outside for a few weeks and the transition from indoors to outdoors, that is like a nagging problem. And then 3 weeks into an outdoor trip or something, you find yourself just doing it naturally because you're just exposing yourself to it every single day. And I'm hopeful that that is something that I start to experience a little bit more. This year has been fewer big long trips and more just a couple outdoor days interspersed with indoor training. So I don't know. I'm curious how my outdoor climbing career will progress if in future years I'm able to devote more time to it, as opposed to just doing kind of seek and destroy trips.
Well, you're already climbing at a level that not long ago would have been the pinnacle of outdoor climbing for women. So congrats on that. But I also want to hear a little bit about your trip to Leavenworth, where you didn't come away with Ascend, and just how you dealt with that.
That was so sad. Yeah, we drove out. Alex and I drove out to Seattle. Initially, we were just going to do the Seattle Boulder Fest climbing competition, which was a couple months ago, a month and a half ago at this point. But I had tried this problem in Leavenworth, the Penrose Step, which is a V14, in around April of this year. And the first day out on it, I did every move, which made me feel like I would be able to do the climb very quickly. And then the weather is a really big challenge there, because we planned to be out there for a week in the spring and we didn't get any other dry days. And then we came out here, we were checking the weather. We ended up getting 2 dry days across 2 weeks, which it just is really, really challenging to plan your schedule around it. So the first day out on it, I fell on basically the last, there's like a really big heel rock over move that I can do pretty easily in isolation, but I fell on it 3 times from the ground. And then the next time I went out, I thought it was going to be dry. We drove 2.5 hours from Seattle out to there. The whole rock was completely soaking wet. This is how you know I'm an outdoor climber now. I took a fan and a brush and chalk, and I was up on the ladder balancing on multiple pads, trying to dry everything out. I spent 3 hours out there trying to dry everything out, and nothing helped at all. It just is really, really humid in the air, which nothing dries if there isn't sun. And so I ended up getting one more day out. I think I fell on that same move, getting closer and closer 4 or 5 more times. And then we had to pack up and drive home, and it was horrible. I couldn't understand why I wasn't able to do it when I could do it so easily in isolation. And it's just one of those things where it's like psychologically just fucks with you, because you want it so badly, and it almost seems like the more you want it, the more difficult it is to attain. And I also feel like it taught me a lot, because I watched videos of other people doing the climb. And for example, Katie Lamb made it look so effortless. There's like this rail sequence through the middle where it's like a pretty slopey ledge, and you're kind of she just sinks down on it and is able to like really get low and grab it from below. And I watch videos compared to my own climbing where I'm like so in my shoulders, so engaged. And it made me realize that I have a lot of work left to do on that specific style. It just felt so different from what I'm used to. And I was compensating by trying to burrow through it and really use muscle when it was a technique problem. And I think had I sent it, I wouldn't have to address that almost. It's one of those things where, I don't know, maybe I'm trying to reframe it just because I'm sad, but I do think that it'll create an opportunity for me to improve my climbing and improve my technique because I didn't do it. And because maybe the reason I didn't do it is because I spent so much more energy than I need to through that whole middle section, when in actuality, if I were to use a different technique, if I were to figure out a way to weight my feet a little bit better, like we were talking about, it would feel a lot more manageable through that section. I don't know. It's one of those things where I feel like I'm learning so much from it, and I'm in the middle of the learning. Like, we haven't had the ending where I feel like it has all paid off, and I'm hopeful that I'll feel like it has all paid off at one point. But having two separate trips where I wasn't able to do it has been frustrating in a way that I haven't really experienced with other climbs outdoors. I feel like usually either I abandon something immediately because I find it's not something that interests me as much as I thought it would, or I have pretty instantaneous success. And this is the first time where I am interested in doing it. I feel so close, but things just haven't aligned yet.
It's funny having that feeling where you're like, I don't understand why this didn't go. Like, it's clearly within you. You're like, I did all the moves. I can do this move in ISO. And then when they don't come together, it's a really frustrating feeling. That maybe that's just outdoor climbing. But I also do think there's merit to what you're saying, where if you are projecting something or something is hard for you, I have a buddy that argued that the best reason to project hard things for you is because it forces you to learn new techniques, because that's the only way you're going to get through it. Because you can't burrow through it, and that is a kind of like a good forcing function. It's just like, okay, it didn't work. I'm going to have to change something else. And, maybe someone more hard-headed could just say, oh, I'm just going to go train harder and harder and make my muscles stronger. But that always caps you out. And when you see it, you go like, wow, this person is exerting 30% less than me. I got to learn what that means. I don't want to go try to get 30% stronger.
Yeah. And I am grateful that I'm able to see those videos of other people, that I'm able to see examples of people who have been able to make it work that way, because it shows you what's possible. And I do want to go get stronger. And it's a crutch that I can even get through that section the way I am. But I sent that video to Tim Kemple, who is I don't know if you know him. He's
OG.
Such a good climber. OG, and also just one of the best techniques in the game. And I was like, yeah, look how, I almost got this climb. It was so sick. And he was like, wow, you have a lot of tension. You really need to relax. And I was like, that's what you have to say to me? But then I was watching and I was like, dang, he's right. I really need to relax. I am so not relaxed on this climb, and it looks bad. This climbing isn't about looking good, but at a certain point, it looks good for a reason. It's because it is better. And I don't know. I have a lot to learn, which is cool. And I want to go back to the boulder. And at some point I will do it, and it'll eat me alive until I do it, but in a good way.
Yeah. Good technique does look beautiful in anything. And I want to echo what you said, where it's not about looking good on the boulder. It's about doing it. And you do need to get scrappy, but there's a hint there that when things don't look good, there's often something that can be improved upon. And I think this is why it's so fun to watch the Olympics and gold medal matches, because it looks beautiful. And it's because people are doing things with perfect technique. And even if you aren't familiar with, I don't know, ice skating, you still go they're good. Yeah. That looks effortless, even though we all know it's not. And so, I also just got to put context around this climb again. Penrose Step is a amazing V14 in Leavenworth. When I went to Leavenworth, I walked up to it. I think it might have still been the ladder project back then, which was, sounds like maybe there's still a ladder there.
There is.
Nice. I think it's interesting that the climbs that you are seeking out and having these experiences on are absolutely amazing. Just gorgeous. I mean, I haven't been to Leavenworth in a long time, but in my eyes and my memory, that may be the line of the area. So props to you for just chasing these, just perfection. If you're going to go outdoors, you're heading towards the gems for sure.
Yeah. I think that there is an element of aesthetic beauty that also attracts me, where I see a line that looks so perfect that it almost compels me to climb it. And I've done other climbs. I recently did a climb in Little Cottonwood that was 4 moves. The whole boulder was 10 feet tall, this kind of dumpy turd of a boulder. it was fun, kind of, but
Is this mantra? Are you?
yeah. It like I appreciate that climb for what it is, but no one's looking at it. Even my mom, who knows not a lot about climbing, was like, "That boulder's kind of ugly." I was like, "Yes, mother, it is." But
I did it. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I appreciated the challenge, and that climb I had wanted to try for a long time. I tried it. I saw a sim that was set at the Boulder Project by one of my good friends, Ray, and I looked at the sim and I was like, oh, for sure I could do that. That looks easy. And I didn't try it. I don't know where that confidence came from. I didn't even try it because I had a finger injury, but I was like, I could definitely do that if I tried it. And so it just kind of stuck with me where I was like, there's this boulder that looks exactly like that sim in the gym that I need to go out and try because it's literally 15 minutes from my house, 15 minutes door to door, or I guess door to rock. And it's right next to the road, like as close as it possibly could be. So it was like kind of my perfect boulder. I felt like everything aligned for me to try this boulder. And it wasn't beautiful. The moves weren't particularly interesting. There was not a lot of creativity. So it didn't really check the boxes that I normally would try and check. It was just one of those things where I was like, this is a boulder that I know I can do. It's going to be hard. I think one of the hard things is going to be weighting my feet. And I identified that immediately. And I was like, this is a boulder from which I can learn a lot. I don't think I learned as much as I hoped, maybe, but I don't know. I'm usually attracted to something very different. This was kind of me trying to branch out and try new styles and different types of rocks and different types of aesthetics, different movement and hold types. So yeah, just trying to bop around a little bit, do things that are new and novel and fun.
I mean, all climbing is fun, but I think that one of the indications to me that a boulder is really special is when someone, like it sounds like your mom, who isn't a big climber, still thinks it's cool. Like that, there's something about that when you stand under a boulder, and yeah, again, if it's a non-climber, there's just like there's a little bit of like intimidation or intensity under it, and you just go, "Huh, I wonder if I could get on top of this." Like that would be cool. And I love when that gets woven into. Yeah, the beautiful movement, being outdoors. Yeah. So it sounds like you're catching the bug. Well, it sounds like you kind of.
It does feel that way. And there definitely have been times throughout the outdoor season where I'm like, do I even want to go back inside? Like, do I even want to compete anymore? And then I have to remember, like, yes, I do. It's cool that I feel so fulfilled doing multiple things. And I do think climbing is so unique in that there are very drastically different avenues through which you can enjoy it. And I love that about it, but it also creates a pressure where you're like, there's only so much time, there's only so much energy, there's only so much skin, and you have to devote it toward the thing that means the most to you now, or you think will pay the most dividends in the future. And I love competing. I love how I feel when I compete, and it's sometimes hard for me to remember in the moment when I get really captivated by outdoor climbing, where I'm like, I love both so much, but I need to choose what I'm going to enjoy the most in the future. And right now that is comp climbing, but I don't know how long that will be, honestly.
Well, I'm here for both eras. I love seeing you compete. I love hearing about just that mental side. Just you were able to articulate, especially in our first podcast, just what you brought to the table and how deep you went. And I think that sometimes one of the negative parts about climbing, having this other discipline outdoors, is that it happens sometimes where people struggle in indoor climbing in competitions, and maybe it is what they truly love, but then they kind of talk themselves out of and say, oh, I'm having success out here and I'm going to go outdoors. It's kind of like the shiny thing. And it can be tough to be honest with yourself and recognize that maybe you're just bailing on your, World Cup dreams because like you flashed a V12 and now you're like, oh, this is what I'm heading towards. And because sometimes, when you try to really be great at something, it's hard and it's not just a simple straight line up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up. It is vulnerable to want something that badly and to not succeed. And I mean, I felt that a little bit last year after doing the World Cup season and not feeling particularly proud of my output or I don't know, there just were a lot of things about it that I didn't enjoy. And I felt a little bit lost. And the obvious attractive thing sometimes is, yeah, I'll just climb outside. That way I don't even have to worry about it. I don't even have to think about it. I also think sometimes for a lot of people, there's like a sponsorship pressure because sometimes the outdoor climbing is it's just more, I don't know about sustainable, but like you can have more success more frequently. You can't create a competition that doesn't exist. You have to actually go. And there are so many ways. I mean, everyone who climbs a boulder, I feel like is successful, but in a competition, there's only one winner in that sense. So there are a lot of different factors at play that I think can compel comp climbers to go in the direction of outdoors. But at the same time, I do think that it is cool that so many people have, because I really appreciate doing what you love just for the sake of it. And sometimes I know a lot of people who have put their head down and done competition for longer than maybe they should have, because it just is for them the path of least resistance. It's what they've done this whole time. They don't want to think about trying to approach something in a different way. But for a lot of people, they go outside and they're like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. Like, I mean, literally, but also I have done this, I've been in this rut for so long, and finally I'm approaching things in a different way and experiencing. I mean, for a lot of people, it is about, I am connecting with nature. I'm doing something that's a long-term project that's making me like really focus on something for a long period of time and like reckon with myself and my own feelings of self-limitation. And there are so many things about climbing outside that I think some comp climbers never experience and I never experienced. And I think there are still things outdoors that I have yet to experience. I don't know. I think it is making me better indoors, but I also think that there will be a time in the future, I don't know when, but that I will be done comp climbing and that I will want to focus pretty much exclusively outdoors.
Those boulders will still be there. And you said the thing you choose pays dividends. And what we've been seeing is that people who have success in comp climbing are having success outdoors. And while that arrow typically doesn't go the other way, maybe just, it's hard to switch it up. My hunch is that comp climbing probably does build a better base for whatever you want to do than outdoor climbing. I could be wrong on that, but the one thing that I would point out about the mentality of being great outdoors, if someone decides to, switch from indoors to outdoors, is that although there's in indoor climbing, there's a date that comes, you have to show up and you get put up against the best in the world and the outcome is uncertain. Outdoors, you have to really seek that out, and you see the best climbers in the world where they're climbing things that it's unclear if it's possible or not, period. And then, you could say possible or not for them, but I think that the best in outdoors also exhibit that same uncertainty where they put themselves into situations where they really don't know what's going to happen. And I think it's easier in outdoors to just go to kind of safety ticks. Like, you did all the moves, just go do it. Like, I know it's possible, just go do it. And so that's the only caveat I have. If people go into outdoors and want to make their mark, I think that the headspace that the best occupy is still probably similar in that way.
Yeah, I think that has posed challenges for me where I mean, I've been conditioned to feel like if I can't do it in 4 minutes or 5 minutes, then I don't do it, or then I can't do it at all. And that is so far the opposite, where you talk to people who are really the most elite outdoor climbers. I've talked to Alex about this. She's gone to climbs and not done a single move her first session, and then eventually done the climb, which blows my mind. I've never had that experience. I hope to someday have that experience because I want to be putting myself on climbs that are challenging enough for me, but I know that I've been guilty of exhibiting those tendencies of I can't do all the moves in one session and therefore it's not even worth my time. I'll just come back later when I'm stronger, or I'll just find something different that is more like my style. But what is or isn't your style sometimes is dependent on what you invest your time and energy into. And I think that's an area where I have yet to grow, and I hope to be able to do it soon. It's so easy to gravitate toward the low-hanging fruit, but that isn't the frontier at which you have the most development as a climber or as a person.
Well, you don't seem to be one to just stay inside your comfort zone. So yeah, when that era comes, I'm here for it. And yeah, Melina, I'm not going to ask you how do you go from good to great because I've asked you at least once. And I remember it was part of it was be scrappy. So I like that. Did you prep anything for that whole idea of what's been working and what you want to double down on in 2026?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been working is that I mentioned this earlier, but I really, really try and focus on my weaknesses. I think it's such an unglamorous thing to do, and it isn't fun. It's often the least fun thing to do. And also inherently your weaknesses always change because as you invest more time and energy into one thing, then maybe something else falls behind, or you realize that something else was kind of obscured, but now that you've elevated other areas, that is now your weakness. I think one of the biggest things is accepting weaknesses. You hear that the hardest part, the first step is always acceptance. And sometimes you aren't willing to look in the mirror and say, this area of myself, because you really start to identify with it sometimes. You're saying, this area, this part of me isn't where I want it to be yet. And the important part is yet, that you say it isn't there, but you're able and willing to work on it. So I think the biggest thing that's been working in my favor has been my openness to accepting my own shortcomings and appreciating them and honestly like welcoming them and being like, this is exciting because I now know where I'm going next. It gives me a sense of purpose and a sense of direction. So I think where I'm going from here is always changing, but the general theme is I am going to figure out what I need to improve on, and I'm going to be relentless about improving on that until I find a new area that I need to improve on.
When you identify a weakness, like it sounds like maybe compression and slopers were something you said that you noticed. When you start tackling it, how often is it technique versus strength? Like it's when I hear someone like you who is extremely strong, extremely technical, has had success, when you go about dealing with a weakness, do you automatically just say, oh, like maybe I need to, have stronger compression muscles, or, maybe I need to work my sloper on the hangboard, or, is it more, gosh, I just don't understand how to move well in compression? Like, how do you go about attacking those weaknesses?
I think for starters, it's doing that type of movement over and over. And I think usually you can see pretty much off the bat if you are experiencing progress. I usually can tell if the progress is due to different body positions or understanding how to do the specific movements. And for slopers, even from World Championship to now, I've noticed a lot of progress, and so much of it is body position. Because those type of holds, it's like if you're under them, really sucked under them, they're going to feel a lot better than if you're out from the wall, if your center of gravity isn't beneath them. So much of that is technique. It's climbing with other people, seeing how they hold and move through those holds, and trying to replicate it. So I think part of it has been exposing myself to experiences where I'm climbing among other people, letting other people push me. And I think that's a vulnerable place to be, in somewhere that I haven't been comfortable before. You're deliberately doing the thing that you're the weakest at among other people who are better than you are at that thing. And it's a vulnerable place to be. It can be extremely uncomfortable and sometimes demoralizing, but you have to remember at your core why you're doing it. And in that sense, I feel like that's where I progress the fastest, and I've identified that. And then there is an element of, do you just get stronger? And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes, like when I was doing pinch type moves and I realized that was a weakness, I was like, I really just need to be able to pinch harder. Like at the heart of it, if I can't hold the holds, then no amount of technique is going to really help me. So then it was like doing pinch block and doing deliberate, while I'm doing pinch boulders, trying to squeeze the holds even harder than I normally would. So it really varies case to case, but I feel like the first thing is just getting on those types of climbs, and especially getting on them among your peers who maybe are more proficient at that style.
I can imagine it must be rough for you being in Salt Lake. People know who you are. They saw you get third place on world championships. And then I'm just going to toss out a grade. And it's like, why is she on that like V6 sloper problem and she fell? Like maybe she's not that good. Like that's hard. I don't know. Vulnerable but it's real. If you want to get better, well, how are you going to get better if you don't even try? Yeah.
Yeah. And you so have to just embrace the concept of failure that, I don't know, you have to like completely inure yourself to it, where you're going and you're expecting, like you're putting yourself in positions to fail over and over and over again, because you can't be self-conscious about that. You can't even think twice about what anyone else is going to think. You can't think twice about how it's going to affect your own confidence. You just have to be willing and able and ready for that failure. I think that is like another place where moving forward, I seek out opportunities to fail, especially in practice, because the more you fail in practice, the more prepared you are for performance.
So I just want to be brutal and poke on this more, because someone listening might say something like, well, easy for you to say, Melina, like, who cares if you fail? Everyone does know you and knows that you win nationals, or get, just podium. Like, in some ways you already have those accolades around your neck. Were you always like that? Were you always able to work on your weaknesses, even if, people were watching?
No, I really, really hated it for a really long time. And I would always gravitate toward my strengths, and I would always lowball myself and try things that I knew I would be able to do in front of other people. And I always preferred to train in isolation, away from anyone else's eyes. I was very self-conscious I do feel like the first time I ever won nationals, I was like, okay, I can never show weakness again, which is just a crazy thing to think, because that is the thing that inhibits your growth the most. But for some reason, it made sense in my brain as a younger athlete, a less experienced athlete. But what I've realized is that I don't think those accolades or titles really mean anything. And maybe that just is because I've come to value them a lot less. But having had success does not guarantee any more success. And I feel like as I continue to approach comps, I consider myself an underdog in all of them at this point, which might not be realistic, but I always feel like I have to fight for every single inch. I have to fight for every hold, and I'm comfortable with that. I expect it to be hard. I hope it's hard. Those are the experiences that I really strive for. And it doesn't matter whether I'm going to a world championship or to a local at my old home gym. It just, every single comp, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to get scrappy, and I'm willing to be beaten down and get back up, because that is what I like the most about competition climbing, is that resilience. And I put myself in positions where I have to do that. I have to be that person. I have to get back up, whether that's in the gym or in a competition, no matter what it is. So yeah, I guess you could say that it is easier when you have accolades, when you have had success in the past. But along the same vein, I don't feel like focusing on or remembering those successes is how you get more successful. I think it always is about being hungry, and whether or not you're hungry for the next event, the next championship.
Amazing. Let's just leave it at that. Amazing, Melina. I see why I have done 3 podcasts with you. I can't wait for the 4th.
Thank you.
Congrats on an amazing year. I'm looking forward to watching you continue to be the underdog. I love what you said. You fight for every inch, and that you're used to that, and that's what you're there for. So, okay, on to the bonus, the Patreon stuff.
If you want to hear that Q&A and other extra behind-the-scenes content from this episode and others, head over to patreon.com/testpiece to sign up now. Patrons also get their episodes early and ad-free. There's hours and hours of bonus content there to help you on your own path of going from good to great. Still not sure? There's a free 7-day trial for you to check it out. And to help the show grow, please share this episode with someone who would love it. Okay, see you next week.